Now the debt's never going to be paid off. You kind of anybody could understand that. So the collapse will be in. It'll probably be under the guise of a war, but it's their last chance to prep out for this event that's coming up. Now, where is safe on the planet? Well, obviously, some of these BRICS nations, obviously, they've mapped something out that these BRICS-aligned nations seem to have a higher probability chance of not being as disastrously overwhelmed with natural events. So in a business analysis, if you know somewhere or some underperforming or non-performing asset, you're just going to clip it. You might lose a little money. You're just going to shift that to something else. So we look at these nations right now, which are undergoing extreme currency problems and economic and socioeconomic society just ripping at the shreds. These are the ones I believe have already been earmarked for liquidation. And that money will go over to these new areas, perhaps the Sahel in North Africa, which is more equatorial, double crop rotation, but you can start the debt system for the globe just getting Africa online.
Okay, folks, I'm indeed your host, James White, and this is Valley Broadcast News, brought to you by Valley Broadcast Network. We're delighted that you're joining us here today. And as you can see already, we have a guest with us today. A lot of time we go without a guest, but today we're delighted to have back on the show someone who's been on a long time and been a long-time guest. And we've been friends for several years and used to do a show together. He's one of the first people I think of when if I launch a new network or start broadcasting somewhere new, I always reach out to David, and he's always generous and with his time to come on the broadcast, and we're delighted to have him on the show today. He, of course, is a weather trends expert, and he just got back from a long trip all around various parts. He's going to talk about that here. Adapt 2030 is his great channel on YouTube. David Devine, thanks so much for joining us here. I think it's your first time actually on Valley Broadcast Network. You've been on Northwest Liberty News broadcast lots of times, but we welcome you here today to the show, and we're delighted to have you. Look forward to what you got to say.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. And as always, it's about sharing the information with others so we can get a wider picture, a more filled in picture of, what the plans are to reset the world and how you can protect yourself against that. Now, as Jim mentioned, that I was traveling, and for me, I was able to see 3 different instances of currency reset or devaluation with my own eyes and just see how the people experienced and kind of dealt with it. So first we went to Croatia. Last time I was there, they were only using their native currency, the kuna. But this time when we went, just to the beginning of this year, they switched over to exclusively 100% euro, and that was the last stage you could trade your kuna in to actually flip over. After January 1st, anybody holding paper money, it was worthless at that point. So you just wonder how many billions of dollars people had laying around under their mattress, or it was cost ineffective to go to the next big city to trade in $10 or $20 worth of currency. Prices doubled. And everybody was yipping and yapping and griping about it because in the EU, they had this interoperable trade agreement where the last time we went there, all the seafood was caught pretty much local in the Adriatic Sea, like an hour and a half from where we were, right at the coastal. But because of the new EU agreements, they had to ship in shrimp and also squid from like Spain, for example, when they could get it right there at the coast. So everything was super expensive. It really doubled in price, and we weren't expecting that. Sell in May and go away says it all. David Brady warns the S&P could nosedive to 1,000 points, erasing 14 years of gains. CEOs like Jamie Dimon have been warning about 70s era stagflation. The 70s were a lost decade for the stock market, but gold and silver exploded higher. From 1972 to 1974, gold gained 240% and silver surged 315%. China, Russia, India, and South Africa's central banks' buying spree for gold hasn't slowed. The same countries that comprise BRICS, an alternative to the U.S. dollar, is already live. Call the proud Americans of the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Mention the Adapt 2030 channel. You're going to get some great in-class service. Also, Patriot Gold Group has a no-fee-for-life IRA where your
IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver. No fee for life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And also now for the 7th year in a row, Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs top-rated IRA gold dealer. 888-546-7020. And now on with the video.
So we ended up going up to Italy, and they've already run through like a euro adoption in Italy was one of the very first ones when the Eurozone formed. So they were one of the first 5 countries that adopted the euro from like day one. The lira went away. They started euros. Everything doubled in price. And you remember those stories in the 1990s about that. Well, since that time, everything has kind of calmed down, and it's back sort of coffee's a euro. You know, you can get a meal for 10, 12 euro. You can get a carafe of wine, local vineyard somewhere that's in the 55-gallon oaken drums on draft for like $10. Things have stabilized in price there. Where other places it's upsetting. And then Hungary we went to, 10% food inflation per month just since the beginning of the year. And it was up 40%. And that was in addition to how the prices had risen during COVID. And then as we were leaving, they were on track for another 10% over the next, 4 to 6 weeks. And finally over to Japan. And the last time I traveled in Japan, it was 100 for a US dollar, 100 yen for a dollar. This time we went up there, it ranged between like 148 to 152 because we changed money a couple times. They internalized that, and it was very sorrowful around. You could just feel it like it was something in the air. You could cut it with a knife. It wasn't external. But down in Croatia, it was very external. People were voicing their displeasure. Very vocal, very in your face. Anybody that wanted to listen, they wanted to talk about it. But in Japan, it was the opposite. They didn't even want to talk or acknowledge that their government had messed up so badly that the monetary policy made them lose face because the government is so absurd and corrupt that their money is devaluing. Although I must say one thing. They sold about 200 billion worth of treasury bonds and then bought gold with that. So however their monetary system is tied to Bretton Woods Agreement post-World War II that set the foundation for the Japanese yen to then build itself off into this, sovereign currency. That of them selling the bonds at the bottom of that base layer affected their actual money supply as we see it today. So maybe a message to the world, don't sell your treasury bonds if the base of your currency is actually priced in treasury bills from the 1940s post-World War II, or you'll experience what Japan did. Hope you all learned the lesson. But anyway, that's what I saw, and I wanted to just kind of start the program with that.
Well,
it's happening everywhere, right? Everywhere now.
Well, let me ask you this, David. For as far as this, I don't know the countries that you went to specifically, if they're members of the BRICS. I don't know if all of them are. Some may. Do you think there is this currency devaluation and this looks like a currency collapse? If you go 10% a month, food inflation, it's not very long before you're looking at an absolute collapse. People just can't continue to afford that. Do you think this is maybe perhaps, and of course, I'm not in the meetings and you're probably not either, but do you think this is orchestrated in some sense to drive people towards BRICS, make their currency devalue it or cause order out of chaos, of course, is their method. That's their methodology. So if you don't want to join, they may just put pressure on you. So, like the old thing, you don't pay the, you don't want your place to burn down unless you pay the protection money, one of those type of things. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Just when I'm hearing from people way smarter than me that America is using that thumbscrew move to keep people in and using the dollars. So far, what I know that Saudi Arabia has gone away from exclusive payments for the U.S. dollar, and they're going to announce it here in the next 3 months or so, next 90 days or under, that the petrodollar will no longer exist. It would be a multi-currency payment system for any oil or energy across the OPEC nations as well as Saudi Arabia. Now, that day itself will be a day that will live in infamy. You will watch so many things break in a single day once Saudi Arabia officially announces that they're no longer exclusive dollar payments. What I see with the BRICS is it's not exclusively a note, like we're used to the $100 US bill, for example. This is going to be an interoperable, it's kind of like a diamond where you get the different facets, cuts, and edges on that, where some of it's going to be resources traded between, like maybe your country needs nickel and my country needs manganese, and we'll swap that. But the way they're going to do that is they're going to be using real world assets, or RWAs. And for those of you in cryptocurrency, understand that you can tokenize or actually put a value behind 1,000 tons of manganese or 100,000 tons. And that'll lock up and wrap itself in a smart contract. And then that 1,000, let's say, tons sitting on a ship somewhere ready to go is wrapped up in the smart contract, and you can send it over the blockchain, or you can use that as a store of value that could then swap between nations as payment for something, because the underlying asset's still there. It's just like a gold-backed currency. The gold's still there. It doesn't matter where the paper moves to. So maybe it's not even on a ship. Maybe it's in a warehouse, or maybe it's in a mine somewhere, in a facility, actually in a storage area that could be taken out at a moment's notice. But the underlier is still there. So they're going to be using, as far as I know, metals, base metals, raw materials metals, gold, silver, lumber, fisheries, and this is the base five, like the five pillars in the bottom there, of what can be swapped between nations themselves outside the US dollar. And BRICS Pay, they call it BRICS Pay, it's already operational, and it's a running parallel to the SWIFT system. So anything that is between these BRICS nations is completely outside the dollar already and working amongst themselves. Now, what they're trying to finalize here is this gold-backed asset part of it. And if they are going to issue a currency, but it doesn't look like they are going to issue like a BRICS note, quote, air quotes there, like we do the $100 bill. I think it's going to be swapping of assets to pay off debts, and also in addition using different cryptocurrencies. I know Bitcoin was talked about there for sovereign debt settlement. And I was thinking, wait a minute, like they can't, at $70,000 or 62 today, that's not sovereign debt settlement. $10 million Bitcoin is debt settlement. $15 million Bitcoin, that's sovereign settlement. So this is what I've heard, and so far, I know Ethiopia just joined. Most African nations are in line to join now. And if you think about all the resources that are going to be coming out of Africa,
That's right.
just the size of Africa alone, the maps we look at are very misleading. Africa is the size of the United States and Canada times 2.
Oh, yeah.
That's the
huge.
landmass of Africa.
There's
So put
tons
it in
of
perspective
resources.
like that.
You talk about calamities. If we lose the world reserve currency status, which it looks like we're moving towards that, I don't think people realize how much that benefits us as far as like our ability to purchase goods and services and stuff at a is even though it's inflation's taken off, even as low as it is now, it's low now compared to like if we lose the reserve currency status, we're talking gallons of milk for $8, $9, $10 or more. I mean, gallons of gas, same type of thing. This is what happens when we lose the reserve currency status. And then all those dollars that's been awash all over the country, man, those things are come flooding back here. We're just looking at, unless we take control of it, David, we're looking at potential third world status here in this country. And I know that sounds like hyperbole, but I don't really know if it is. But I don't know if it's going to get that bad everywhere. You can certainly...
Wait, could I go on an electromagnetic solar change on this? And she talked about solar activity here,
Yeah.
and I know you want to stay on that. Like the electromagnetic field is changing off of our sun. And I do believe this is one of the reasons we're getting like these 5X class solar flares in the last few days, is because as Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune form their square, which they will in October of this year, that square has not been seen in the same sector, the same quadrant of the solar system. Last time, 79 AD. So as the Earth's going to pass through this potentiality of electromagnetic field, the lobes of our brain are going to be affected. We have electric brains. So the perception, what I've heard and what I've seen and experienced, and a lot of people are saying in the reports and peer-reviewed research, and there's a lot of information coming out, that with this amplified electromagnetic field, we are going to perceive more, see more. So if you see glints out of the sides of your eyes, like shadows, or you just don't, you're like, did I just see something? I don't know, it's weird. Or if you hear things that are a little bit out of your auditory range, but they come in range, and you're starting to hear hums or sounds around your house that you didn't normally hear because your auditory range is being affected too in a wider a wider range of sounds that you can hear with the sight as well. So this electromagnetic change as it comes in, and we really are going to start to get very large noticeable effects as we come into October of this year. So the solar activity, one thing, but then how do elites on the planet control humanity that's awakening this quickly? Well, my whole thing is absolutely currency collapse or war would be starting during this time because they would want to keep the populace so distracted and so discombobulated in such a fear state that as is, I wouldn't even say upgrade, but just this change of perception moves through and sweeps across our planet, that could be overridden perhaps or interfered with.
So they can't stop it.
Event.
They're just trying to control it. They can't stop it because it's a phenomenon that's beyond the control of mortals. It's beyond mortal controls. They know this, so they're just trying to sort of manage it so they can still continue to stay in power when that happens. Is that sort of accurate? Is that kind of what you're trying to say?
It is, and it's not just our solar system that's experiencing these same electric changes. The entire spiral arm of our galaxy and our neighboring stars as well around this quadrant of the spiral arm we're in, this Birkeland current that's rolling through here is amplifying in its frequency. So our sun is also being affected, and it goes through these phase state changes, and we're starting to see one now. I do believe with all these flares popping off, boom, 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 this is signaling that we're coming into a phase state change. And it's so interesting that the four gas giants are lining up, and we're in the last 6 months before this is happening, and suddenly the sun starts just absolutely going bonkers. So I believe it's related. And as the planets square up and then the Earth passes through the middle of the square, we've got the sun, the Earth, and the planets squared, that potentiality of electromagnetism flowing to the outer planets, it's going to pass through our Earth. Definitely our electromagnetic field. The magnetic field of the planet is going to be changed. The hemispheres of our brain are going to pick up and process reality differently during this time. And I think that's what spooks and scares these elitist programmers is we're about to break through the programming all at once, everybody at the same time. So then what do you do to stop that? That's right. What do you do to stop it or control it or make sure you maintain your power on the backside?
Well, what's this? Are you familiar with this? And I haven't looked into it an awful lot, but this idea of the Kali Yuga, I believe it's called, where we're moving closer towards the galactic center of the universe, and it's just like a cycle. I say all the time on my broadcast, David, and mainly because of you, because of what I've learned from your work and from so many times that you've been on the show, we're sort of trained to think linearly, like from January 1st to December 31st. And that's how we're kind of trained, right? That's how those people in power want us to think. When really like nature and space and everything happens in cycles, like all the universal stuff happens in cycles. And we're going through another one of these cycles. Like you had stated, it hasn't happened since 79 AD. Well, this Kali Yuga and this moving towards the center of the universe makes us apparently, what I'm understanding is it makes us more alert and more enlightened and more aware and, whatever you want to call that. As we move closer, we become smarter and we become more in tune to what's going on. That's the theory anyway. And again, I'm throwing it out there. I don't have a lot of background or experience on it. I want to say that up front. I have more questions certainly than answers. Are you familiar with that? And what's your comments on it, David?
Yeah, because if you look at the Milankovitch cycles, our Earth does something similar into the Ice Age pattern where it gets on an ellipse where it's further out or it's closer in. Like when we're closer in as we are now with this interglacial, we get the warmth of the sun because we're so close in on the elliptic orbit or the ellipse orbit. Now you could think the same thing as we're moving in and out with the spiral arm of the galaxy as it would form in an ellipse too and spin in and closer to the galactic center further out. So if you think Milankovitch cycles, and you look at 80, 100,000 year intervals, half million year intervals on really extreme ellipses, would it not be the same thing where the spiral arm of our galaxy does something, it bends in further, flexes back out further a little bit? But that would be, you're talking 25,000 year intervals and thing like this.
Correct.
But even minute movements closer away or closer into an intensified magnetic field or further away from an intensified magnetic field, and then also the power source of it, all these currents flowing through, these Birkeland currents, these electrified ropes in space. So now you got two variables. You got the magnetism and the electricity. And as we come in and out of this flow on a regular pattern, this is what was mapped out in these yuga cycles. The Mayans talked about it. I mean, you can go back through time immemorial. Full back, Sumerians talked about it. Mesopotamians, the Hittites were recording it. I mean, everywhere you go, they understood this cycle of, and then you need to ask yourself, why at this time does the world need to be changed to move lightning fast with central bank digital currencies, track and trace, social credit scores? Why do we need to move there immediately so fast that it's almost breaking the system? Unless the vibratory pattern is moving and increasing so fast that old systems won't work. Like I was trying to explain when I was talking yesterday on our radio program, which, by the way, you used to host with me. I still have that program.
Is that right? Over on Revolution Radio?
Yeah. They've revamped as well on Revolution Radio.
Yeah, good times.
But think about the church, the control they had in the 1450s. Like that system of control will not hold state today. It absolutely would never, ever, ever work again. The control that they had and the destruction they brought about and the tortures and the inquisitions, like that won't, literally can't hold state. The vibratory pattern of that system of control could not be replicated today because we are vibrating so much faster that Iron Age kind of control system, we've had to change gradually as it's gone along. Well, we're coming into a hyper fast, quick change here too. So as you can see, the control mechanisms for the farm Earth here, or different control mechanisms for different farms across the planet, political systems, that needs to change. Lickety split, as they would say in the South. So why is it all this change happening right now? Well, if you start to look at these external forces that are way beyond, like you said, control of any human mortal, this is galactic types of changes and regional star system changes. I mean, they know the cycles. Don't get me wrong. These elite understand those same cycles.
Sure they
that
do.
The
Of course
Vedic
they do.
texts talk about, the Yugas talk about, the Mayans, whatever. You can go deep, the Aztec, Hopi, there's how many prophecies are out there that it's not about a prophecy. What they're known is they're just talking about the cycle, and they know when it's going to return and have these massive effects on our planet, weather systems, human psyche, abilities, perception. And they just map that out because they all understood the same cycle. Well, the elite do too. They've got all the records from back 500 years ago. They've been stealing things for 500 years about all these cycles and all the ancient tech.
They know these cycles, and they try to anticipate the actions that occurred during these cycles, and they try to take control of it. We can see culturally things are changing. We can see the degradation of, and it's such a dichotomy, because in some areas it's getting better as far as people are waking up more, and there's more people that were sitting on the couch previously doing nothing, waiting for somebody to save them. They're sort of getting off their, finding their sea legs and sort of trying to, start groups and form together. So there's some good things going on. Some areas, David, it's getting better. In some areas, it's crumbling like in a breakneck speed.
I wanted to swing back just before the break. You said, like, how does it all tie in together with COVID? Well, if you understood that there's a cycle coming that there's really no control over, it's a natural cycle. There's really nothing we can do to, stop interplanetary changes. We can't really affect the sun to stop its, resonance output and UV spectral output. I mean, these are things that are beyond human control. But you understand the cycles here. But you're also going to understand that as elitists with all those different records that we don't have, information to, Vatican Library, et cetera, private collections, like how many museums are around the world that are, contained within, that have so much information that public will never, ever see. You can gauge the timing pretty good down to within a few months of when this reset, this natural, interference or awakening would occur on our planet here. So if you knew that was going to happen and you only had a few short years left to prepare, continuity of government, but you needed more money, and you had to have an excuse to print never-ending, unlimited amounts of money without really raising too many eyebrows. So think about it, just on the money printing alone, how much more continuity of government? And, they kept talking about these shortages of canned goods, this and that. Really, was it? Or were the factories still chugging along 24 hours a day, extra shifts and everything, but everything produced was going into rail cars and underground? Continuity of government. So the amount of money that was printed, there's more money printed in these last, 4 years than there had been in the entirety of the American, what we couldn't know as economy. So think about that for a second. How much extra buying possibilities were put in place Now the debt's never going to be paid off. You kind of anybody could understand that. So the collapse will be in. It'll probably be under the guise of a war, but it's their last chance to prep out for this event that's coming up. Now, where is safe on the planet? Well, obviously, some of these BRICS nations, obviously, they've mapped something out that these BRICS-aligned nations seem to have a higher probability chance of not being as disastrously overwhelmed with natural events. So in a business analysis, if you know somewhere or some underperforming or non-performing asset, you're just going to clip it. You might lose a little money. You're just going to shift that to something else. So we look at these nations right now, which are undergoing extreme currency problems and economic and socioeconomic society, just ripping it to shreds. These are the ones I believe have already been earmarked for liquidation. And that money will go over to these new areas, perhaps the Sahel in North Africa, which is more equatorial, double crop rotation, but you can start the debt system for the globe just getting Africa online. So we've run through the full debt system. It doesn't go anywhere else except for resetting it and starting it over in a new part of the world that has never experienced growth from zero, literally from the 1850s is kind of what I consider a lot of places in Africa. There's no running water, no electricity, no connectivity, barely any healthcare. And that's a sad fact in this day and age with that much wealth and minerals that they got nothing still. It's just baffling that they're living in trash. It's upsetting to even look at it. Like, how do you steal that much from people? But, if you're going to reset the debt system and then like, oh, I'm going to make a bold prediction. If anybody's alive in 80 years from now, Africa, you will step in Africa and you will not know the difference between an affluent American neighborhood and an affluent African neighborhood after this fork turning starts in Africa.
Completely agree. 100% agree with you. I think Africa is the new, that's the new ground that they're going to break, and they're going to rebuild from, like you said, practically dirt floors. It's interesting that we talked about yesterday, and we'll spin back to the conversation we had yesterday about, I told you about my time over in Hungary when I went over to Budapest. I went to Hungary. I did some contract work for Ford Motor Company many years ago, and they built a plant, a Ford Motor Company plant out in Hungary, a place called Székesfehérvár. So I went out to we went out there and stayed in Budapest, and drove there to the job every day. Well, when we would at night, we'd go downtown to the Danube River, because that sort of split the Buda side and the Pest side. And the Pest side was just like, just people living almost in dirt huts. There was not really anything going on. It was people living, you could tell it was a low, it was low income, and there was people that were not destitute, but they weren't very economically strong, let's put it that way. But on the other side, it was big hotels, and that was where all the gambling and prostitution and all that stuff. They had it all. Now David tells me he just went there and it's completely flipped. Well, not flipped, but now this Pest side that was all pretty much farmland and people living in small houses and dirt ground, and no grass, no really infrastructure. It wasn't that bad, but it was kind of bad compared to the other side. David tells me now it's miles and miles of what? You tell me Tartaria type of architecture. I hope you got photos.
Thousands of photos. I was blown away. I thought that side of the Pest side over there was original and it had just been reconstructed after World War II, parts of it, but you would not know whether you're walking through like the late 1800s or if that was reconstructed recently. I tell you, whatever they did was such a most unbelievable, marveling job that I'm baffled that you tell me the story, because what I saw was something so very different. I was walking through a time capsule of what I consider the late 1800s, and you're saying that they converted that and revamped all that in just 30 to 40 years. Yeah. That is insane.
30-something years. Yep.
Insane. You really have to go. And what he's saying and what I'm saying, and you put these two worlds together, are any of our ancient buildings really ancient, or is everything we've been told a lie in historical terms? Because what I saw I have been fooled then. I've absolutely been duped in terms of historical timelines. The basilica was still there.
No, that obviously castle was there. That huge castle was there on the other side. That right? But that was like,
that was all restored after World War II. Germany bombed the crap out of that place, and they restored a huge amount of. So everything you see of that castle today that you think it was, oh, it was built 200 years ago. Look at all the fine marble work and all the craftsmanship stonework. That was all built since the 1940s, 1950s, I should say.
beautiful architecture in Europe. Is the architecture there is so much better than it is here. It's just I just marvel. We went to several places, and we don't have to go over the full story, but we had a chance to travel around. We got the job done really early and rented a car and drove all through Europe and through the Alps and all through 5 different countries, and it was quite a time. Let's talk, if we can, here about what happens next. We, are we talking about, you've heard, and we're not fear mongering or trying to panic people here on the show. I mean, there's nothing we can really, there's no reason to panic and panic anybody, because there's nothing we can do about it. It's galactic changes that you can panic all you want to and do it, get all uptight and get all, have your stomach all in knots. Ain't going to change things. Are we talking about like extinction level event type stuff, David, that's coming, these changes? Or, because apparently, and I don't know, I've not been around for 5 extinction level events, but apparently there's been 5 previous extinction level events from what they can tell. Are these type of things probably on cycles as well? Do you think these type of events that are coming up here causes those type of extinction level events, or are we looking at something different from your perspective?
Yeah, that's the way you look at it. You can either embrace the change or you can be in fear. And I really believe the narrative builders want you to be in fear. So any of these types of natural energies sweeping through that, you'll miss them, that could be your opportunity to rise above this darkness, for a better term. I do believe the perceptual changes will be here. I'm not going to talk an evolutionary leap like Robert Felix did with cosmic rays, but I will step out and say we are going to absolutely have enhanced abilities. Now, it's kind of interesting, too, with all these Marvel movies that have popped out over the last 10 years.
First thing I thought of, dude, when you said that. First thing I thought of.
Yeah, everybody having magical powers and and then all the Harry Potter stuff. So imagine if our brains are upgraded, not the physical body, but just the brain, the ability to use a larger percentage of your brain. I mean, through history, they talk about manifesting instantly. I mean, you talk about Jesus turning water into wine. That was an instant thing, taking fish out of a barrel, and there's endless fish pop out of this bucket, If we truly start to get these abilities, then how would that change the world also? Well, those in power would definitely lose their power. But if you do, I don't think it's going to be a complete wipeout of species. I do believe there's going to be I wouldn't even consider it an upgrade. I would just say an enhanced ability for our brains to perceive information or manipulate matter close to us or bend matter in the hologram a little bit more easily would probably be the best term for it.
Is that why the shots?
How terrifying is that for the elite, though?
mRNA technologies in it that try to screw up that whole process that you're talking about. Maybe it's used to interrupt.
Short circuit.
Yeah, it's short circuit, or as an interrupter for that process. Maybe that was their attempt to try to hold that down in as many people as they can. Again, we're just speculating here. I never really thought about that before, but that is absolutely viable. As far as the awakening going on, if they need to interrupt that, because they have to maintain their power. And I'm not really into I don't really do the whole horoscope thing or any of that really. I know it's probably as well as most people in passing, but apparently there's supposed to be some sort of an age switch. We're shifting into a different age, and I know that is celestial more. And again, I'm an expert on that, but it is sort of becoming an age of knowledge that we're supposed to be transferring into. We think linearly. We think of, and if you look at the great work of these guys, Howe and who's the guys that did that work, The Fourth Turning. These guys laid it out.
Strauss and Howe.
Yeah, Strauss and Howe. I read that book probably 15 years ago.
Yeah, how many umpteen years ago was that book out? That just forecasts what was happening right now.
Precisely. I read that book and I'm like, man, these guys got it nailed down, because what they do is they used cycles. And I didn't even really know you then. I hadn't even talked to you before, and I'd read that book many, many years ago. And then when we kind of connected and started doing shows together, and I started looking into your research and this and that other thing. I'm like, hey, this guy sounds like these these guys. And the fourth turning, like there's no stopping it. Like it just happens. Like you can't avoid it. It's just you have to, like you said, you have to embrace it. And I think, like you said, they know. Like you also said, they know what's going on. They have the best minds and brightest minds that you can possibly, best the money can buy, working for them, mapping all these things out. And I don't know about this whole looking into the future, or apparently this technology, that looking glass. I don't know about all that. I've never seen any of that stuff. But they do know what's going on. And I don't know if it's necessarily a looking glass. I think it's maybe looking back and seeing what happened in the past and forecasting that for the future. David?
Yeah, because you think that where we transit through space, our orbit, even though we're in a spiral arm of the galaxy, it could only go around one time, and then we're back into the same, energetic flows again, or the energetic densities of space, whether it's either particles or heat, it doesn't matter. The energetic densities, the magnetic densities are going to be the same, because we're going to come back through the same area of space again. And if you knew what happened previously, when we come back to the same area again, the energetics should remain the same. Not exactly, but very, very, very similar. So if you can map that out over 12 years, 11 years for a solar cycle, where you can map it out for a 2,000-year cycle on a zodiac sign, or you can map it out on a great year cycle of 25,000. You can map it out on an ice age cycle. We can go further back and get to these longer duration cycles. But, you pinned on something earlier when you were talking about linear time. You said January 1st through December 31st. Now, the research I've done shows that originally there were 13 months. Now, there's a lot of calendars. The Gregorian calendar is the newest update for the calendar system. But apparently in the old days, quote unquote, there was 13 calendar months. That's why September doesn't really match up when you're with the 9th month versus Sept, which is 7, and October, which is supposed to be an 8, and then it occurs on the 10th month. Like a lot of these things, even using the base Latin, don't match up with the months. All right, so just even that, the Egyptians had a different calendar as well. So even just how many different calendars there were, but they're all base 13. Why suddenly we got base 12, and then we got the leap year, which makes no sense. But the same thing is true with the zodiac signs. So you were talking about, are we in the age of Aquarius? Yeah, we're probably a little bit deeper into it, depending if you believe that Ophiuchus or Draco are the 13th star sign. And originally, base 13, we had 13 zodiacal signs versus 12. Because, that zodiacal sign needed to change with the Gregorian, or with the calendars also. And during the time of the Inquisitions, what did they do? They killed almost everybody who had this ancient knowledge, whether you were an herbal healer, whether you understood the stars. I'm so glad the Arab traditions hid this information and kept it, and then, squirreled it away to bring it back out again so we could understand. The Chinese as well. And we went through this purge across the world. They tried to remove all that information out so they could reset the system. That was a reset as well during that time. So the calendar changes down to 12 months needed to reflect now a zodiac change, because you can't have a 12-month calendar and then say, well, there's 13 zodiac. Well, that doesn't make sense, because they're supposed to match with the month. So if you went from a base 13 down to a base 12, that makes a lot of sense on all these changes that we've seen and additions here and thing. So it depends on the timelines you're really looking at and the energetics involved with each one. But I will leave you with one thought here. They talk on the stock markets and they say, yeah, millionaires that are playing Wall Street, they use quant and they use analysis and graphs and charts. Billionaires, they use astrology.
Is that right? It's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. David, we're
sidereal. It's very clean. Sidereal, the original Vedic Indian astrology, not this Western hodgepodgey stuff that we squeezed together after we changed the calendar to 12 zodiac months. The sidereal astrology from the original, with the Vedic text and further back into some of the Rishas, etc., go back in. That is the base of astrology based on 13 months. That's the original.
I would encourage you guys to look at the work of Billy Carson. Billy Carson's done some really cool stuff.
For sure.
Billy Carson's done a lot of great work. Okay, we're just out of time here. David Devine, researcher, trends expert, Adapt 2030 on YouTube.